Coming off of Mass Effect 1, which was a great game, I sort of knew what to expect with Mass Effect 2. The first game did a solid job at laying the foundation for the series in regards to how the game would play and feel, and I knew that the sequel would be different, but I didn't realize how much better it would be than the original. But to be honest, I didn't always feel that way.
But Shepard, they'll follow her. She's a hero, a bloody icon. But she's just one woman. If we lose Shepard, humanity might well follow.
Then see to it that we don't lose her.
In my opinion, the gameplay is what took the biggest leap from Mass Effect 1 to 2. Yes, a lot of it is the same, but it's how you do everything which is different. At first, I didn't like the changes because I was so used to how everything was in the first, but once you start getting used to this game, it all starts to come together. And to be clear, the gameplay in this video is from my playthrough on the Legendary Edition, not the OG. Something that may not seem too important but was a huge deal to me was the map. In the first game it was confusing to navigate, but you were able to pin location markers that would help you find wherever you were going. Once I started using these, finding where you wanted to go wasn't hard, but in this sequel they took that feature away and instead changed how the map looked, along with giving labels to each of the locations as well. This was one of the harder changes I had to accept, as I already had trouble with the map before, but now with these tweaks I thought I was going to struggle even more. But instead, the devs did a good job in making the hallways between each place easy to navigate and distinguish from other areas, which made finding each place a breeze. Initially, I thought using the map would be very difficult to do, but once you give it a try yourself, you'll see it's not that bad. Even still, I wish we could ping locations because that's always a good feature on games with lots of areas to explore. Another change that was jarring was the switch from no ammo to having ammo for your guns. Before, each weapon you used had a sort of heating system where you could fire infinitely until your gun overheated and you had to wait for it to cool down. But now in this game, your guns had ammo which you could find next to crates, dropped from enemies, or littered around areas within a planet. At first, I hated this change as I was used to blasting my enemies with tons of bullets and not having to worry about ammo conservation. But slowly I made the mental shift towards keeping track of my ammo, and it made this change easier to deal with. What was cool was that when you picked up ammo, it not only filled the gun you were using, but the other guns in your arsenal as well. So let's say you were using the shotgun at the moment, but you also had a pistol and machine gun in your loadout. Well, that ammo would refill the mag on those weapons too. This mechanic seems a bit generous, but it helped to make the transition to this mechanic a bit smoother for sure. My playthrough was on normal, but I would imagine that on the harder difficulties, the game would drop less ammo or you wouldn't receive as much. Let me know in the comments if this is the case. Now, what I think this gameplay was lacking a bit was the RPG elements. I can't put my finger on it, but it seemed like we had less choices in regards to weapons and powers than before. In the first game, every character's skill tree was a lot bigger and had more options to choose from, but in this game that wasn't the case. You still had upgrades to choose, but they were a lot more condensed. Like each member has their own unique powers and moves, but you can see the lack of depth in all of these. And to make matters worse, receiving skill points took longer, so unless you did a bunch of quests, you weren't receiving a lot of points to upgrade the little bit of things that each member did have. This was a bit disappointing as the whole skill mechanic is one of my favorite aspects of the first game, but I'm glad it was still implemented in the sequel. It's just one of those situations where you had a good thing going and you didn't need to change it, but by changing it, you made it worse. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention that in order to reset your stats, you had to pay in order to do that, where before you could just press a button and reallocate all your points without an additional fee. If there was one area of the game that shouldn't have been messed with, it was this. In regards to the gunplay, I thought it was improved, but only slightly. Because of the new ammo system, it felt really good to use all the guns, and switching between them was pretty seamless as well. Combine that with the powers and everything felt as it should. I do think that in this game you can't run and gun as much as before, but that's not a big deal. In each area there's plenty of cover for you to use, and depending on the situation, you're going to need it. But as I went through battle after battle, I realized that something started to bother me, and that's the movement. The movement in Mass Effect has always been stiff, but man did it get on my nerves in this game. As I mentioned, you have to move to cover all the time, but just moving your character feels like you're going through mud. It doesn't matter if you're walking, running, or ducking behind cover, you're just slow and static. I don't know if this was a result of the game's age, or if it was intentionally designed to be this way, but man, it was a pain. I didn't struggle in this game, but I can imagine on the harder difficulties that many people have died because the movement hindered them to some degree. The crazy thing is, I don't know what could be done to fix this. It's not just your squad that moves like this, but the enemies do too. It's like in order to make the movement better, the devs would have to overhaul everything for this game. This issue isn't game breaking, but I'm willing to bet that there's going to be times you want to do something specific and your character takes forever to do it, leading to some sort of unexpected outcome, whether it be death or something else. Regardless, if the movement was a bit smoother, this gameplay could have been even better. What I was surprised at was the depth of the entire space system. There are so many planets to visit, it can be a bit overwhelming at first. If you're like me, then on your first playthrough you might think that all of these can be visited, but in reality that's not the case. Some of these can be visited due to story reasons, while others you can visit only after using your scanner. The scanner mechanic isn't explained the best, but it's actually really easy to use. Now, if you played Mass Effect before, then you're no stranger to the character choices. These in-game dialogue choices would affect the outcome of the story, along with who lives and who dies. This is present once again in the sequel, but just like everything else, it's changed. I'll go into the story later, but most of this plot centers around you trying to recruit members for a pivotal mission, but what you may not know is that these members can die depending on certain choices. First off, your dialogue choices can get them killed or help them stay alive. Just like before, you'll be faced with various scenarios that you must get through, with all of them including different situations. Depending on what you choose, you can get these members successfully recruited onto your team. But it's what happens after which is so important. After they're recruited, if you interact with them over the course of the story, you'll receive character-specific side missions in an attempt to earn their loyalty. These missions are arguably the most important missions in the game, as they will decide how the end of your story goes. Unfortunately, the entire mechanic suffers from a problem in the first game. The game doesn't stress their importance. Sure, the game tells you to talk to other people and upgrade stuff, but it doesn't inform the player properly of how crucial it is to get these missions done. Maybe that's how the devs wanted it to be, but I think it's kind of unfair, especially if it's your first playthrough. Then to make matters worse, you can have a situation like mine. I did all the loyalty missions for every character and still ended up having people die when starting the final mission. Why, you might ask? Because I simply forgot to upgrade the ship. Yes, you heard that right. Because I forgot to upgrade something, people ended up dying. Thankfully I had a save, so I was able to go back and keep everyone from dying, but imagine if I didn't. I would have been cooked. The cherry on top is that within the final mission, you have to assign certain crew members to do different things, and depending on who you choose, those people can get killed too. What I'm trying to say is that it seemed like this game was designed to intentionally get you to kill your crew members. It's like the devs went out of their way to have you kill at least someone. Maybe they wanted this so it would entice the player to come back for multiple playthroughs, but for someone on a first run, this just stinks. Personally, if I didn't have friends that told me ahead of time about how this game was, I wouldn't have known to do the loyalty missions and to keep a backup save at all times. I think it just sucks that the game was made so hard to keep everyone alive, but then again, maybe that's the whole point. Maybe that's exactly how it was always meant to be. I don't know, but for me, I didn't like that gameplay decision at all. To sum it up, the gameplay for Mass Effect 2 is the same in a lot of ways from the first, but had a handful of tweaks. Some of these are for the better, some not so much. Regardless, if you enjoyed the first, you'll definitely like how this sequel plays. It's just as fun and gives you that sci-fi experience that you would expect from this series. The story in Mass Effect 2 is just like the gameplay. Similar, but different. The opening scene sets the stage for how much bigger and complex this title is from before. Avoiding spoilers, but the game opens up with your ship, the Normandy, being destroyed along with Shepard. You're then brought back to life thanks to Cerberus, a human supremacist paramilitary group led by the Elusive Man. Once awake, we learn that we have to assemble a team to take down the Reapers, and from here is where the story really begins. Over the course of recruiting these team members, we go through countless battles and intense situations that will put your decision making to the test. All of this takes place in different locations, giving you various settings to visit while still progressing the story. What I thought this game did a great job of was having us interact with an almost entirely different crew. The majority of this crew was not present in Mass Effect 1, but this story did an excellent job at making them all unique and getting you to understand why they act the way they do. The different personalities meshing together along with the overall plot made this feel so connected. There's even times where you have to break up disputes between crew members, just like you would if this was real life. I think where a lot of the shock factor comes from is how you approach the game. When making the decisions I've already mentioned, whatever you choose is deemed as a good or bad choice. After you do this a bunch of times, you'll be more of one side versus the other, thus affecting the story. Outside of that, the crew member deaths is where a lot of the memorable moments will come from. In between all of that, this story isn't anything too special. You still go from planet to planet, building new relationships and solving problems, but that's exactly what I expected. What I think this story benefits the most from is the improved mission design. Out of all the aspects in this game that were changed before, the mission design is by far the best. Each mission has you doing so much more than in the first game. Even the battles are bigger and more exciting, as each mission has a lot more going and is more intense. This boost in mission design means that the story within it is a lot more impactful and important to the overall lore of the universe. The dialogue between the characters all has varying degrees of importance, but the majority of the time it's always worth listening to. What makes this even better is that the choices you made in the first game do carry over and affect different aspects of the missions in this sequel. Like, depending on who lived or died, you may see returning characters who will give you missions missions on whatever planet you're visiting. Usually during these segments, the dialogue will mention something from before and what they've been doing since the end of the first game. Along with that, I loved how you'll be completing missions and interact with random characters that will notify you of events on other planets that are a direct result of a choice you made from before. It seems like everything in this game is connected and unified. Even though this is a completely new game, it's still a solid continuation of the world of Mass Effect and everything in it. Because of this, it feels like you just started a new game, but picked up exactly where you left off. And this is apparent right from the opening cutscene. In terms of the villain, I didn't think the whole concept was as cool as Saren from ME1, but they got the job done. Saren was a lot more memorable and menacing, but this time around I was just like, eh. I hope that in the next Mass Effect the villain will be more similar to Saren, as I loved how he was done in that title. The story for Mass Effect 2 is good, but nothing crazy. I think where a lot of the memorable moments stem from are from the decisions you make, good or bad. If the villain was better, then it would add a small layer of fear that this plot needed in order for the player to really feel the gravity of the situation. Otherwise, it's kind of the same thing. Work together to kill a threat to the entire universe, but even still, it's definitely enjoyable. Overall, Mass Effect 2 is a great sequel that made some changes to what was already a solid foundation. Most of these were welcome additions, but I thought that some could have been left as they were. Both the story and gameplay continue what was established before, while changing up enough to keep things fresh. When you combine the upgrades with the core gameplay loop that was created before, this game is an absolute blast. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game a 9. In my opinion, Mass Effect 1 was already so good that it's hard to improve upon it. I think the devs did the best they could at making what was already good even better, but sometimes it wasn't necessary. However, for the majority of the game, everything included was done better than the first. From the mission design, planet variety, and dialogue choices, it's all done at a high level. With the high scores this game received, it's apparent that this title cemented this franchise as the definitive sci-fi video game experience. And after finally playing this for myself, I can't wait to play the third game in the trilogy, Mass Effect 3. What did you think about Mass Effect 2? Did you like this more than 1, or are you hearing about this for the first time? Let me know in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to watch one of my other reviews right here.